Welcome to the Configure Price Quote podcast. My name is Frank Sohn and I'm the founder of CPQ Consulting. This podcast is 100% focused on Configure Price Quote, also known as CPQ, and will provide you useful insights into this topic. My guest today is Tracey Shirtcliff, founder and CEO of ScopeBetter, and a seasoned entrepreneur with over 25 years of experience. She created the ScopeBetter platform to assist professional service business with their pricing. Tracey joins us from London in the UK. Welcome to the CPQ podcast, Tracey.
Hi, Frank. I'm delighted to be here. I was told today by somebody when I said I was going to be on your podcast, he said, "Oh, wow, Frank's the Stephen Bartlett of the CPQ world."
Hey, that's a nice start. Excellent. I'm very happy to have you, Tracey. And let's maybe start talking a little bit about what you did before you started ScopeBetter.
Well, when you say I'm a seasoned entrepreneur, I've been in software and producing software platforms for quite some time. So before ScopeBetter, I had a tool called Traffic Live, which was a project management and workflow tool for creative agencies and professional services businesses. So I was on the opposite end, I guess, from a CPQ. I was in what I would call the awarded work. So once you'd won a piece of work, it was all around resource planning and project management. So for me, the move and the transition into what ScopeBetter does was kind of an easy vision into the pre-awarded work and trying to improve that for creative agencies, creative businesses, and professional services companies.
And now one interesting thing is obviously based on your past experience, how does it help you right now building up ScopeBetter as a better company?
Well, I always say that means that I can see the pitfalls or the height of the mountain we need to climb or the potholes that are coming towards you, the holes in the road. Does it help me avoid them? Maybe not. Maybe it just means sometimes I can breathe in. It also sometimes helps with regards to things we've learned before, how you can structure teams, how you can work best with clients. So anything in business and with a bit of experience before helps. I'm not sure that it means I always chart things in a better way, but we certainly try.
And one question I have to ask. So the company was founded, I think, in 2015, right? So you still consider yourself a startup or you're beyond that phase?
No, it's relative, isn't it? Because startup means that you can still be creative and think outside the box and create new things and pivot and modify. So in all the sense of the startup world is that you're creative and you're doing things differently as you need as businesses develop, then I'd say yes. The reason that we started in 2015 is because that's when I exited my previous SaaS business. So from that business, we took the rights to all of the data that ran underneath that previous platform, Frank. So in proving our pricing and CPQ model for creative agencies and professional services businesses, we took data from over 1,000 creative businesses and we built a whole platform around trying to move people from a time and materials base into outputs or deliverables. And we did that with, kind of the early phase AI. So a lot of statistical modeling, some natural language search and various bits and pieces. So we kind of started with a whole host of data, and that took us several years to develop the sort of thing that you could probably do in 6 months today.
Yeah. Excellent. And when you look at the business today, right, in 2025, what do you think? What's the most interesting, what's the most daunting task in 2025 for you and ScopeBetter?
Well, I think it depends on whether you're daunted by it or not. ScopeBetter is fundamentally, and some people love this term, some people don't, but we term ourselves a services CPQ. So we help businesses who create complex pricing with roles, rates, and hours. And so in 2025, the one that's kind of directly in our eye line, and hopefully anybody that has a services business around time, is what's happening with the advent of AI and the billable hour. If you want to hear of it or don't, the productivity gain somewhere between 40 and 60% means that there will be an expectation that somebody's going to be reducing their fees. at some point or somewhere. So I think one of the things that we are excited about as a business is how we help those traditional fee-based billable hour businesses move to different ways of working around value pricing and various other modalities. And that's really what we've been hooking into actually since we started in 2015, because that's the model that we were trying to formulate, is how that you can make services pricing repeatable and scalable across businesses.
And we will talk more about that in a minute, right? So, but before we go there, I was wondering, what do you do when you don't work?
That's a great question. I'm originally from New Zealand. You can probably tell, or somebody can tell from the dulcet tones. So I love the outdoors. I'm very adventurous. And it kind of comes with kind of two tracks. So I ski, water, and snow. I I kite surf. I play horse polo. I do all sorts of things. So I love kind of the adrenaline rush and the junkie piece. And I also do a lot of gym stuff. But on the other side of that, I'm an avid biohacker. So I'm into whatever is the next thing, whether it be, throwing myself into a cryo chamber at minus 110, or whether it be, jumping on a bike and putting on a hypoxia mask so I can kind of thrive in my mitochondria. So all sorts of things. But I love I love kind of pushing the boundaries, kind of in, I guess, kind of physically and in also what kind of the expectations. So biohacking for me is I want to live much longer, but with higher quality.
Very interesting. So, and thank you very much for sharing that, right? So now let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about ScopeBetter, right? So, and I would say, why don't you tell me what products and services you offer in your own words?
Fantastic. So we effectively, I talk about it with passion, is that we help professional services businesses to solve what we call the pricing problem. And everybody goes to me, well, what is that? And traditionally your readers would say, well, is that a services CPQ? Yes, it is. But what are those services businesses challenged with? Typically, we work with creative agencies or IT consultancy businesses, and those creative agencies can be the typical advertising agencies, PR, digital, or they could be a mix of all sorts of different things in the media world that we have at the moment. And all of those businesses have the challenge around lots of different roles, rate cards, hours. They can scope and price, and we put the two things together lots of different ways. They could be scoping by a timeline, so they have a plan that they've got to deliver it. It could be scoping by role, so hours, roles, rates. It could be by a type of work, so what is it that's being delivered against various different phases and different elements. Or it could be, we call it scoping by scenario, which I've heard others talk around, which they call kind of guided selling. So what are the various different attributes or angles that you might have in a pricing scenario, and then kind of locking those in. And then also in our kind of services market, you get either project-based pricing, you could have fixed fee pricing, you could have retainers, FTEs. I mean, there is an enormous amount of complexity. And so in those businesses, you also get, depending on who's putting together the fee proposal or the scope of work, as we call it, you get a lot of inconsistency. So different people across different teams and different locations. Then you throw in the complexity, and then the tools that they're using. Primarily at the moment, we would come up against an Excel spreadsheet, a Word document, a Google Sheet. That's producing what we call scattered data. So, and by their very nature, spreadsheets are fantastic, but they do spread data across a business. And then what does that mean for a business that's trying to improve its pricing and solve the pricing problem? You've got blind spots, lots of things in different people's individual files, lots of things in different places across a business. And that's fundamentally what we're trying to do, is pull that all together to make sure that pricing determines profit from a successful point in a business in its growth.
Excellent. And I have to follow up on one thing you mentioned, right? So your most present competitor is probably Excel and manual processes, right? So, but do you see more competitors showing up in the last couple of years? Service CPQ, I think, was very unheard of 10 years ago. Over the last couple of years, it feels like it's happening more. I was just wondering if you see more competitors popping up over the last couple of years.
You know, the irony here is that there's more things popping up with software across all facets. So, you know, we all started with kind of iPhones, and then, you know, the App Store, we started with a few, and now I've got hundreds. I came from a previously very successful project management workflow tool. And when I started there was probably 4 or 5 key players in the market. Now there's probably 400. I think that means, and the same for kind of services CPQ. And I think that means it's important to know what your specialty is, know what and I call it your superpower, know what your superpower is, and make sure that you wrap around that for your clients and in how you develop your business going forward.
What customer size do you focus on? Are you working with specific customer size most often?
So the key thing for me about size is really around when does a business start to feel pain? And so we focus on anybody who's basically got that needing to manage any sort of pricing or scope management that's greater than kind of 20 a month. And then again, what's the size or complexity of the team? If they've got a couple of people, it might be achievable. But then if they've got, 10, 15, 20 people who are feeding into the scope management process or pricing, then that becomes problematic. And the tools that they have at the moment then don't become robust enough, and issues happen, problems. And so really, for me, it's around size and scale and how that business might work. We work with some global businesses that have multiple offices, multiple clients, different locations, different teams. And we also work with individual businesses that might be one office with various different ways to work, different complexity and a moderate amount of scope. So it's really around where is their pain met.
And is the majority of your customers in Europe, or, I mean, you already mentioned a couple of customers globally, but the majority of them is in Europe. Is that correct?
Ironically enough, probably 70% of our client base is in the US, 65 to 70%, and then the rest is all around the globe. And I think that is really about the proliferation of US businesses understand that good process can drive good business. They're also much more educated in various different solutions and things that they might be looking for and problems to solve. And I think Europe and the other businesses across the world will catch up for sure, but they're a little bit behind.
Got it.
And there's, of course, more businesses in the US. It's a larger market.
Yeah. And how many employees do you have at this time?
25, give or take, up and down.
And they are all located in one location, or you have multiple offices?
We're a distributed team, so we're all around the globe. And that is not just for our sales team, but that's also for our professional services team and for our engineering and development teams. So it just means that we can get the best talent in the best place to service our customers in the best way.
Got it. Excellent. And did ScopeBetter receive any investment so far, or are you still privately funded?
Great question, Frank. So we started life bootstrapped or invested from a previous business exit. And 2 years ago, we took some investment with Fuel Ventures.
Excellent. Do you have any partnerships that you want to mention here? Someone you work with very closely on a regular basis?
Absolutely. We have a couple of partnerships, and we kind of divide it into kind of two tranches, really. We have those that are kind of technology partnerships, and we work with kind of all of the usual suspects that you would imagine. So we work with Salesforce, we work with all of the kind of CRM vendors, so HubSpot, Zoho, and then on the other end, we work with kind of the various different platforms like DocuSign, Smartsheet, so all of those things that other customers might use to kind of work with. And then on the ERPs, it could be a Workfront, a Deltek, an Oracle, a Workday. All of those are what we would consider to be partners from a technology perspective. And we drive those forward for multiple reasons around how we can best integrate with them and work with them for the success of our clients. And then on the other side, we have consultants that we work with. So one of the things that we like to do is enable this movement away from the billable hour into different ways of pricing, and value-based pricing is very big at the moment. So one of the key people we work with in the industry who's very prolific and talks a lot around this is Tim Williams. You also have Brian Kessman and a number of other kind of key people. We work with another business, Aperto Partnerships, in the media space. They have a lot of kind of specialties. So we see ourselves as a platform that help businesses enable themselves from a technology perspective, and then partner with anybody else that might add some value about how their businesses run and how they might want to activate that in the best way for them.
Excellent. And on the website, I read that you integrate with 1,000 tools. I thought that's a bold statement. So tell me a little bit more about that, please.
It is nice and bold, isn't it? We fundamentally, the nature of being a CPQ in today's tech stack environment is you're going to need to integrate with lots of different things and in lots of different ways. And I know that, as we talked about, our kind of competitive set is 95% is Excel spreadsheets and manual processes. However, at our core, and what we absolutely built as the base of ScopeBetter was our API and how we integrate. So we can do that a number of ways. We use a number of middleware platforms which allow us to connect with lots of things straight off with their very, very, very easily built out recipes, which gives us those 1,000 connections. We also have webhooks. We have an open API. And we also have the abilities for clients to build direct connects into our platform. So we have kind of a 4-phase approach on integration. And I think that's absolutely the core of where anybody needs to be in making sure business can really use these tools. Because we all have our specialties in what we help clients to deliver, but making sure that you can integrate and pass data really is one of the benefits.
Hello, everyone. If you have any questions concerning CPQ, consider contacting us at info@novocpq.com, because we help customers with all kinds of questions related to CPQ. So we're involved in customer projects and we provide industry analyst services. So let me give you 2 examples on what helps a lot of customers regularly and see if that would be a help to you. The number one is we help customers find the right CPQ solution for them. We do that for customers of all sizes in all industries. I've been working in the industry since '96, and we help you to find the right solution. We do that with one-on-one meetings and projects, but we also do that through written reports. So we have the CPQ analyst report is our latest report. We currently have 6 and we'll soon have 7 available. And then throughout the year, we're striving to have around 20, hopefully more by the end of the year, and there will be even more reports. And we also help customers to stay up to date with what's happening in the CPQ world. If you already have a solution and you want to see what's new, we have a subscription that offers a number of hours and a monthly newsletter that shows what's happening in the CPQ space. It's our CPQ Circle subscription. If you have any questions about this, send us an email at info@novocpq.com. And ScopeBetter emphasizes margin management and improvement. Could you share how the platform's features contribute to better margin control and profitability for users?
Absolutely. If we're talking about various different kind of ways that we can help businesses, we've got Scope by Work, which means that you can automatically kind of lock in a series of different deliverables or outputs, and you can lock those down with specific margins directly by client, by team, by all sorts of different locations if you want to. Then, of course, we have Scope by Role, which allows you to put in cost rates and charge out rates and the overall kind of complexities with that. So when you get into services, a services CPQ, they can be very, very complex. You might have different roles and different rates per client. You could have different roles and different rates by team. And sometimes we've found clients that could have hundreds of different rate cards. So you can set a cost rate and a charge out rate. You can identify a margin, and you can lock and set that in the system based on clients as well.
Got it. So, but when customers come to you, they probably, yes, they have tons of different requirements, I'm sure. But what do you say? What are the three most common business requirements that you see from the customers?
That's a really good question. What we typically see is that we'll see that they'll be pricing in a multiple of different ways depending on what their clients need. And the business typically will struggle with having how they can assimilate that information and work with it. And our job is really to take the complexity that they have in their business, in their Excel spreadsheets, manual processes, or how they might be doing things, and then take that complexity and then build it in a simple way that they can then, what I call, have anyway pricing for their services.
Excellent. And I understand that ScopeBetter also has a central services library, right? So to manage service offerings. How does this repository facilitate consistency and efficiency in creating these client proposals?
Great question. So on the work that we did in with all of this data that we had in the first iterations of our product, we built out a standard kind of deliverables or outputs. We had hundreds of them. We call them deliverables. They break down into individual components, and each of those components can have different descriptions. They can be of different sizes. They can have different elements or different fundamental pieces that you can put on them. We have a data area where you can update those within the tool. You can have individuals that can kind of change those. So what we're trying to do is build something that makes it really, really easy for a business to scale and to take it from one person managing pricing to being autonomous and giving that out to other people.
Excellent. So I think you also have a document generation tool, right? So to create client-facing outputs like statements of work and proposals, things like that.
Absolutely.
How does this functionality enhance the client experience and reduce manual effort?
Well, typically what we would do is you would see a staff plan would typically be built up in Excel, and that's typically hours, roles, and rates. And then typically somebody would take that staff plan and then they would plug that manually into a Word document or a Word output template or even another Excel template. And that would be what we would term as the statement of work. And in that would be the words or the kind of the terms and conditions that you might have assumptions, you might have various kind of other key elements that you might have in that. So what we're able to do is set those up. You can create images within those. You can have content blocks. You can lock down certain things that other people can see and edit. So what we're effectively doing is creating a document generator and a pricing calculator together and putting them together with a push of a button, making it seamless end to end. So CPQ, as you know, configure, price, and quote. And so that whole kind of proposal generation, MSA generation, scope generation, that's that whole Q piece. And I think we do that really, really well.
Yep.
Version control, approvals, all of those things locked in as well.
And one thing that always comes up with services, CPQ, is PSA, professional service automation tools also. So tell me a little bit how you work with them and what potential customers need to consider when they look at ScopeBetter.
Well, the irony is that's actually where I came from. So the previous SaaS business that I ran, Frank, Traffic Live, that was a PSA solution. So that's where they deal with the awarded work, whereas ScopeBetter deals with what we call the pre-awarded work. And what we do is we pass that information directly over to the PSA. So we will take over the key client details, the roles, the hours. We have something in Scope called Scope by Timeline, which is a start of that resourcing piece. But fundamentally, we would connect and push over to that PSA tool. So you're going from the pre-awarded work to the awarded work with a clear integration pathway.
Got it. So then you mentioned a little bit earlier also the use of artificial intelligence, right? So that has been talked about now for the last 2.5 years. How do you use it right now? How do you want to use it going forward?
So now we've kind of got what we call our scope mark. You can see a series of different, you can upload, you can download. So we've got a lot of functionality of moving things around and loading things up in the system. You have kind of an area to kind of pre-configure things. We can bring time back in against any of the elements that a client might be working on. We also have a heart function, which tells you the most used item within a series of disciplines or groups, so that people can see what others are using for their fee proposals and pricing at the moment. And that's kind of the very beginning. We've then got plans to add in some of the other kind of, your ChatGPT things, so you can get better definitions on any of your descriptions that you might have. These come out of the box at the moment, but you could also update those as we move forward.
Got it. And you have any certifications that your customers ask for so that you keep the data secure for AI? Anything worth mentioning here?
One of the things we're working through at the moment is SOC 2 compliance, but there's always a lot of kind of focus around, we get it certainly with the large enterprise clients, we get questionnaires and various other things to fill in. So that's a well-worn process for us.
Excellent. So now tell me a little bit about a standard ScopeBetter project. How does it start? Who's involved? How long does it go?
That's a really great question. So we have a professional services team. Their job is to configure and onboard clients against our designed proprietary methodology. Our methodology is a 5-step process, and typically we do an implementation at around 12 weeks. We can make that quicker, or it can be slower depending on size. You might have what we call a parent-child architecture, which is another thing that we think makes us different. So typically at large-scale services businesses, you might have one office works differently from another. They might have different pricing modalities. They might have different roles, rate cards, teams. So we have the ability to kind of configure that at a parent level, and then individually at a child level as well.
And when you go through these projects, what are the biggest challenges that you typically run into that you wish customers knew earlier so that they can address it when the project starts?
So we start when we first engage with a client. We do something called a reverse demonstration. We have a look at how they're working today, and we get them to show us, I guess, kind of the sticky end. So is there anything that we are going to find challenging? And we look at that as a business as being, we're kind of looking for those things that are going to press and challenge us straight up, because the last thing we want to do is to work with a client and find that it might be something that we don't solve. So we need to find that really early on. And you've probably heard or seen it that businesses can come up with lots of different ways to work, and our job is to understand that and then present that back to them with the best, most simple solution for their business with efficiency gains.
And now one question which is important for every customer is, how do I maintain the solution once I have it, right? So can I do it myself? Do I
Absolutely. That's a great question. There's nothing that we at ScopeBetter can do in the solution that a client can't do themselves. They have access to the management tab area, which is where the entire system is configured and built. They can change that at any time. Typically, they would have a series of, they might have, depending on the scale of their business, they might have one person or several people that we would call kind of administrative users who can change rate cards, upload, download. They can add users, remove users. They can, depending on how you might do your integrations, they can kind of use our open APIs, all of those types of things. But there is nothing that we can do in the system that a client can't do themselves. Our job is to understand how they're working today, map that process, and to show them the options as to how they could configure that to the greatest success in their business in the ScopeBetter tool.
And one last question is also, especially the events where people can, or potential customers can meet you in person, can see the solution. I guess they can go to the website, that's understood. But is there any possibility to meet anyone from ScopeBetter, including yourself, at an industry event anywhere?
That's a really great question. We are at the MSP show next week. I am also in Austin, Texas at the 4A's MPF conference in the beginning of at the end of May, at the beginning of June. Typically, we're doing something every month, Frank. We'll have that listed on our LinkedIn page, and no, we're out and about in the world. One of the things that we like to do is be at events. So TSIA is another one. We are absolutely around, and you can find us at events all around the world.
Excellent. Very interesting to know for anyone who's interested, a listener. Now, what's a good way for interested listeners to contact you anyway for any follow-up questions that they may have?
Great. I would always love to hear some of that. So easily through the website, scopebetter.com, or through LinkedIn, Tracey Shirtcliff. It's an unusual name, so there's not very many of us. You can find us through our ScopeBetter page. Or as I said, at kind of one of the events, or reaching out to us on email.
Yeah. And we will have all this information in the show notes anyway. Tracey, thank you very much for making time for the CPQ podcast today.
Delighted, Frank. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everyone for listening and hope you learned something interesting today. If you like the podcast, please go ahead and rate it on iTunes or share it with your friends and colleagues. In the meantime, you can find us online at www.novocpq.com. So long, everyone.